Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. You remember maybe a month and a half ago, I had a guest on whose name was Rich Scheben. And he's the author of One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana, a story that he wrote. And one of the things I wanted to do was get Rich back again and talk about some of the other positive qualities and lessons acquired through his experience. If you remember, he's the guy who left New York City. He liked to fish, he liked to hunt as it was, but he moved out to Montana, and he has been living there for the last 27 years. And for the last 6 years, he's decided to live off the grid without traditional running water, flushing toilets, interior pipes, water heater, pressure tank, freezer, dryer, dishwasher, microwave, TV, all the modern conveniences. And they heat their cabin with an Amish wood cook stove. You can find this, by the way, all at offgridmontana.com. They hunt, they fish, they grow their own produce for food, they raise their own animals, they harvest edible and medicinal plants. So here's a guy that kind of left it all and said, okay, I'm going to give this a shot, and it seems to be working out pretty well. But there are a lot of things that he has learned during this time. We welcome back to the show Rich Scheben right here on the Gary Sutton Show. Rich, always good to have you back. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you for the invite, Gary. I appreciate it.
Obviously, the only couple things you still have are the phone and maybe your computer now and then, right? And that's putting you a little bit on the grid, but not the way we normally think of it. You and I talked before about, all the things that you did. I wanted to kind of refresh that a little bit if we could, and then talk today from the standpoint of some of the things that maybe you're relearning or learning or have learned living in Montana right now and being off the grid that maybe we need to learn here, those of us that are left behind on the grid. How's that sound?
Sure. Well, I got to start with the fact that we as Americans, we really need to relearn 19th century skills. I'm not saying we need to go back to the 19th century, but we need to dovetail 19th century skills, Gary, with 21st century technology. And what we need to do is really look at ideas and solutions that will simplify our life. We need to change our attitude and mindset. We need to look at life as being healthier. We need to be happier. We need to financially live below our means and know the fine line between needs and wants.
Yeah, it's a really interesting statement. I think a lot of us we turn to services many times we could probably do for ourselves. We live beyond our means. We see a government that does that, and unfortunately, I think many times we say, well, why shouldn't we? Probably not to the extent that they do, but the point is that we spend more because of wants instead of looking at what needs are, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think, self-included, by the way, in that whole criticism. So what do we do? How do we get by that? Maybe people aren't ready to go to Montana and live off the grid, but there are ways that people can go about doing that, right?
Well, absolutely, and I make it very clear that every state, folks, has rural areas, like Pennsylvania, where this show is being broadcasted from. Pennsylvania has tons of rural areas. Every state. I even make fun of Jersey all the time, but Jersey has rural areas. We can all move to the country in our respective states, and if we want to stay around our certain jobs, certain family members, certain interests and hobbies, certain weather, we can all do that. So we need to realize that things like political correctness is really destroying the middle class ability to control their own destiny. And people are starting to wake up and realize that we have special rules, laws, and accountabilities based on what victim group or protectionist group status we have as Americans, which is really an insult to the intelligence and work ethic of so many people. So how do you control your own destiny? Here where I live in northwest Montana, I get to create my own energy. I get to grow my own produce. I get to hunt and fish my own meat. We can everything. We raise some animals. Everything we do is not just simplified, but it's regaining the skills of 19th century homesteaders and pioneers that we really lost as Americans because we've been addicted to this blue light syndrome for so long. The computer, the television, the iPad, right, the smartphone, etc.
Let me come back to political correctness for a moment. You said it's destroying a lot of what is, good in America, maybe some of the self-reliance in America. Well, how so? Give me some specific thoughts on that, Rich.
Oh, sure. When I was working for the pharmaceutical company, to be honest with you, Gary, this story is in chapter 2 in my book. And what happened, I'll try to make a very long story short. I tried to go part-time as a job share, And my company told me, I was working for a major pharmaceutical company, and they had told me that part-time job shares were for women only.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out I was working for 7 years with spinal stenosis and nerve damage. I got so bad that I could barely hold up a coffee cup because it would fall out of my hand.
Right.
I've lost 90% of the strength of my arms. I've regained some of them, but when this was happening, at my peak, I could not do one push-up. Now I can do up to 7. So my lifestyle, of my hobby farm lifestyle, as I call it, gives me the opportunity to be semi-physical and do things with moderation and modification so I can stay healthy. And
right.
During all this, it's really ironic. There was a woman in my town who was suing. She was a pharmaceutical rep for another company who was suing her company because a couple guys told a joke. And I had dealt with about 30 attorneys through this situation. I could not sue at all because my attorneys were telling me that reverse discrimination works only in 1 out of 1,000 cases at best. So, in other words, we need more sobriety tests out there to show, like this story, to show that America has been drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness for too long. We've been distracted, dumbed down, and divided as an American people. And when you really look at civil rights policies, they were designed to be judged by individual merit.
Right.
Not by what group we're in. And that's where we are right now as an American people. We're being distracted, dumbed down, and divided.
You know, as I look at this, one of the things that, and I continue to look at your story here, and of course your book, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana, one of the subplots we talk about all the time in our show, the battles that are going on in the country, is between the idea of being dependent and the idea of being independent. The idea of making your own decisions, controlling as much of your life as humanly possible, which you've obviously done in spades, and the idea that somebody will take care of me all the time. The government might take care of me through welfare or some other kind of program that will enable me to continue to live without having to do the things that I needed to do if you are of working age and you're able to do that. Is that kind of an outgrowth part of this whole thing where you say, geez, I don't have to do this myself anymore. Someone will take care of me. I mean, that's a frightening thought to me because that was not part of the blue-collar ethic and the rugged hard work ethic that this country was built from, was it?
Well, no, I call welfare and food stamps, to be honest with you, Gary, I call it beer money, okay? Now, unless you put into the system, and Social Security and workman's comp are the only two that I can really think of, unless there's a fair exchange, a fair balance of exchange with goods and services, putting money in, putting money out, I call it putting money into the kitty. If you didn't put money into the kitty, you really have to ask yourself, are you doing yourself or your or your group that you're in a real favor? Most of these change of opinions that's being done in America today is being done through threats, intimidation, blackmail, bribery, shaming people into conformity. It's more than just social control through imposed etiquette. And these are all subsets under political correctness. The powers to be are using words like equality, tolerance, fairness, and they're using it out of context. These are all politically correct buzzwords. And when you get beer money, especially in your teens or 20s or 30s, and you didn't put into that specific kitty, you're only hurting yourself. And the silence that, because of political correctness, that Americans have, we are really... let me back up. I call myself an average Joe, non-hyphenated American. Barry, okay. I'm not any better. I'm not any smarter than anybody else. But I'm saying after the experiences I've had with affirmative action and quotas and seeing all this political correctness dripping all over American soil where people are literally afraid to even speak, I want to ask your listeners, how can we expect to be the home of the free if we don't have the courage to say it like it is, to be the land of the brave?
What have you learned about freedom in the type of living you've done off the grid here where you're living... You're not antisocial by any means, but you're living out there and you're in control of an awful lot of what's around you. And if you don't control and if you don't do something about it, you don't live that way.
Absolutely. And that's what off-grid living does, Gary. It brings equality to everybody. Because if you don't do the work, if you don't hunt your meat or catch your fish or harvest your own firewood or take care of your animals or grow your own produce or your own... you don't eat. When you look at a lot of old movies, and a lot of older interviews, and people say, "Why do you work?" And the number one answer over the last several generations has been, "So I can put food on my table."
Yeah, put bread on the table, yeah.
So this is just a different way of doing it. I don't have to deal with GMO foods, which causes cancer, DNA changes, and organ failure. I don't have to deal with hormones, steroids, and antibiotics. I don't have to deal with pesticides. No, I don't want to give the people an idea that I'm totally unsocial. We have hundreds of visitors on my hobby farm. I do radio shows all over North America. I'm trying to help people with this lifestyle so they can have ideas and solutions to simplify their life. If they can see a middle-aged guy from New York City doing this, maybe they can realize that anybody can do it, because that's some of my messages. One
of the things, and we're talking again with Rich Scheben, who is a guy who's written a book called One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana, also has a website, offgridmontana.com. And Rich, one of the things I say all the time about Congress, I said, and I told our congressman this one time, I said, go back and tell Congress this and see how long they'll laugh before they give you an answer, which probably won't come. Every bill that should pass should have to go through this one filter. How do I give people back more of their freedom and allow them to keep more of their money to do with as they would, instead of the way we do it right now, which is, if it's not dead yet, tax it again, which seems to be kind of where we're at right now in this country. So I would say you've kind of done that. You've kind of gone back and said, you're still subject to taxes and all those things, I'm sure. But by the same token, you've gone back and said, I want more of my freedom. I want to keep more of what I do. I want to control that which is around me. And I think a lot of people are looking for the answer without moving to Montana that you've already found by doing that.
Well, absolutely. And again, anybody can go rural and do that. And there's a lot of people who might not have the capital resources in order to do it because they might be a little bit on the poorer side. So what I say is barter your skills. You might have some skills in gardening, somebody in alternative energy, somebody in building, somebody in hunting and fishing. Negotiate, communicate. Synergy is one of my favorite words. We're divided, folks. Somebody might have the money to work off the internet, or they already have, to create cash flow for the group. Buy land in a rural area. And if you want to stay in the city, because of the fact that we're in primary season right now, and I would like to share some ideas with your listeners, Gary, and answer that question specifically. And this should be done from every level of government, from local commissioners to congressmen and senators in D.C. If you are, for example, we need practice what you preach laws. That's the best way I can say it. If you participate in legislation creation or demand a greater benefit or lifestyle of the American citizen, and a demand that they pay for it, that should be unacceptable. For example, if you are a proponent of Obamacare, you cannot go out and be a congressman or senator and have a special health care system. If you're a proponent of Common Core, you can't send your kids to private school. If you believe in living green, you can't be flying around in big jets and have 7,000 square foot homes. If you're a proponent of gun laws and have especially confiscation of guns, you can't hire bodyguards, especially have the audacity to use taxpayer money to do it. How can you preach socialism when you live lavishly? And I can go on and on with all these hypocrisies. But this is what the people need to do, Gary. They need to get together. And because of the fact that we're so divided in all these groups, trust, respect, love, forgiveness, value, appreciation, everything is being diminished. And that's why we're becoming less healthy, less happy, and less human. It's all fading away.
We're going to jump in very quickly here and take a break. We're going to come right back, Rich, and talk some more about what Rich Scheben has. Am I saying that correctly? Scheben or Scheben? I want to make sure I say it right.
Yeah, Rich Scheben.
That's what I thought. I wanted to make sure I'm saying it correctly. Rich Scheben with us here, and talking about what living off the grid really means and how we can adapt that to our lifestyles today. All here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA. Just a few minutes left with Rich Scheben, who is the author of One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana, and he's back with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. I saw somewhere, Rich, where you lived in Montana, I believe, 27 years, but the last 6 years you've been living off-grid. Going from New York City to Montana has got to be a little bit of a culture shock. Would I be correct in saying that?
Actually, I knew what I was getting myself into. I love variety, Gary. I can't do the same thing all the time. I enjoy growing up in New York City. I grew up in the 70s and early 80s during the nightclub era. I mean, it was fun. It was a city adventure, and now I'm living a country adventure because I've always wanted to do this. This has always been a dream and goal. I'm not just doing this because of the financial, economic, social, and political reasons why we're deteriorating as a country. I'm doing this because I love nature as well.
Are there any things you miss on the grid that you don't have off the grid now, or have you totally kind of acclimated yourself to just saying, this is the path I've chosen, this is where I am?
No, I think, again, because of the financial, economic, social, and political reasons, the health reasons, I think 99% of why I made this move, I have no regrets at all. In fact, I can't think of anything that I really miss from urban or suburban America at all.
When you look at this whole thing that you've created, which I think is, idyllic, if you're a person that likes the outdoors, you like being out there, you like controlling things. When you look at all of this and what you've learned, final thoughts here, kind of the moral of the story, if you will, and I hate to use that because it sounds so cliche, but it's true. For people out there, what are the lessons? What are the final lessons that they can take away from this interview?
Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, you got to be a thinker and not be a follower. We're too many Americans are following people who do not practice what they preach. The best thing that I do is, for example, this radio interview. This is one example. Helping people is so important. That's even one of the importance of helping others is one of the chapters in my book, folks. We need to help others. We need to be Americans. We can't be hyphenated Americans anymore. We need to judge by hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, word of honor, diligence, tenacity, and principle. We need to have the same rules, laws, and accountabilities across the board. We need to have zero tolerance for political correctness. And I really am a proponent, Gary, of reversing the centralization of America. 90% live in urban, suburban America. If we can get just a few of those people to move rurally and start being healthy and thinking again, and listening to people who have ideas and solutions to simplify life, I think we can be a lot happier and healthier.
You've given me a great idea. Why don't we do that for anybody who wants to run for Congress? And before they do that, they have to at least spend a year being out there doing what you're doing and learning how to be self-sufficient. So when they come to Congress, they're at least ready to go in and do some things on their own and maybe preach that a little bit more. I say that with tongue firmly implanted in cheek, and yet at the same time, it would be an eternal wish that I think we could all have.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what's going to do? These people who are living in virtual reality and not reality, it's going to give them the ability to fight for truth and facts and stand for principle and believe in the same rules, laws, and accountabilities. Because if they didn't simplify their life and know how to plant a seed or catch a fish or cook something or butcher something, these people are living in virtual reality. And we can bring people back because nature brings synergy, folks. And we need to get away from this virtual reality. Rich,
great stuff. Again, the book is One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. The website, offgridmontana.com. You can check it out with Rich. And, Rich, we look forward to our next time here very soon.
Oh, thank you, Gary. I always love being on your show.
Always a pleasure. Take care now.
Too.
Rich Scheben with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Interesting look, huh? Go out and live off the grid and you control your own life. Wow. And I think that's what we're all kind of looking for. How do we get more liberty? How do we get more freedom? How do we control more of what we do? I guess we still have the choice.